they're no longer going to attend the dog sled race. It was made quite clear to them that they weren't really welcome there. They were told by the organisers, well, anybody who's invited to come as a member of, the audience, but there was going to be no special welcome for them.
Now for the latest from the United States, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that US officials have said Israeli intelligence from a human source in Yemen was included in the now infamous Signal group chat that's been making the headlines over the last few days. Let's speak to Charlotte McDonald Gibson, US correspondent for The Times. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi there.
Are we calling it Signal Gate? I suppose we probably have to. We're probably duty-bound to do that. Talk us through what the Wall Street Journal's reporting.
So in this, the Signal chat that we now have pretty much all the details from, one of the messages from the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, refers to the Houthi missile expert and how he is entering the house of his girlfriend. And this is being used as targeting information. Now, Waltz does not name where this information is coming from. He names no sources. He doesn't even say that there's a human source behind it. But the Wall Street Journal, quoting two US officials, say that information was provided by an Israeli source on the ground. And the key point here is that the Israelis, according to this report, are not very happy that this particular piece of intelligence has ended up in the public domain. And this all plays into, one of the many concerns from other intelligence services around the world that this US national security team might not be able to trust them with some of their most secret information. And that's been a concern even before Signalgate, as we're now calling it.
Yes. And so with all of this in mind, Charlotte, is the spotlight on any one specific member of this group chat? It feels to me like actually we're building up a bit of a picture of several of them, perhaps being slightly incompetent with important information.
It's two of them, really, that are taking most of the flak. Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, he was the member who invited the Atlantic editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, to the chat. He was the one who made this comment that we were just speaking about the Houthi missile expert. And he has taken responsibility for it. He said it was embarrassing, which is probably a bit of an understatement there. Trump has said he's standing by him, but I would say at the moment a lot of the heat has been on Mike Waltz. Secondly is the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Now, in the group chat, we see Hegseth really listing the time of each strike. It doesn't say where it's going to be, but you've got the airplane type and the time, and this is listed in the chat. So the question for Hegseth that people are asking is, why would the Secretary of Defense put information like that? Okay, fair enough. He didn't invite the journalist. He probably didn't know the journalist was on there, but should that information be on a public signal, not public, but be on a group chat that he obviously wasn't secured as it should have been?
Just in terms of other stories around from the US as well, shall we talk about the visit to Greenland tomorrow of Vice President J.D. Vance? I'm not sure he's going to get quite as warm a welcome as he may have first hoped.
Yes, that's right. Well, initially it was just meant to be his wife, Usha Vance. She had announced this over the weekend with a very jolly video saying, I just want to go and attend a dog sled race with my son. But of course, it turned into a diplomatic incident. People in Greenland, politicians in Greenland and Denmark said, well, no, this is quite an aggressive move. But rather than scale back the trip, J.D. Vance, the vice president, said, well, actually, I'm going to come along now too. So in a way, it has escalated. Now, they're no longer going to attend the dog sled race. It was made quite clear to them that they weren't really welcome there. They were told by the organisers, well, anybody who's invited to come as a member of, the audience, but there was going to be no special welcome for them. Also, a Danish journalist was reporting today that US representatives have gone house to house in the Greenland capital, trying to find some local hosts for Usha Vance and her son. And everyone was like, no, thank you. We don't want them here. So this has led to the itinerary changing. And now Vance, his wife, and we believe the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, who we were just discussing, they're going to visit a space center, a US space center on the island. So the itinerary has changed, but the message it's sending hasn't really. I mean, Vance himself said that he wants to talk about, I think it was to check on the Greenlanders' security. So there are concerning undertones there that haven't gone unnoticed in Denmark and Greenland.
Charlotte, really good to speak to you this evening. Thank you so much. Charlotte McDonald Gibson, there's a US correspondent for The Times. Just very quickly with Joe and Rachel, the other question mark at the moment is tariffs and whether Donald Trump is going to impose tariffs. And actually, there was a note from the Nigel Farage lunch with journalists today that he reckons we don't have a chance of making a deal to kind of keep the tariffs at bay.
Well, I was reading a story just before we came on air about how actually the share prices of the American car manufacturers have slumped today, because actually the car industry is so international. All the parts come from all over the place, that sort of just-in-time production line system. So actually it looks like he's really shooting himself in the foot. And, you know, the free market operates as the free market. And as soon as you put tariffs in place, in the end, American consumers are going to suffer.
Yeah.
You know, American car prices are going to go up. And I can't see how that's good for the administration.
No. And Joe, the Chancellor, told Times Radio this morning that the UK is working intensely hard, words to that effect anyway, to try to get something of a decent deal from Trump, but he's unpredictable, to say the least.
Absolutely, and I think you know, we did discuss very early on, actually on this very programme with John Pienaar, about the fact that there are a lot of analysts out there that are already issuing reports talking about a possible backlash against US goods, that there is this sort of growing sense of unease about how America is behaving. And I say that as in the government, but actually it's then how the economy sort of suffers because of its goods globally, and whether there is a sort of boycott that develops. And certainly with regards to the conversations, I mean, we'll keep having conversations. Of course we will. The government will keep talking.
Yeah.
But at the same time, while all these other side chats go on about what Europe are going to do about this, you know, the coalition of the willing, etc., there are so many side dramas going on as well that could knock any of it off course, because Trump could just get up in the morning and decide he wants to do something completely different.
Yeah, the tariff hokey-cokey continues. Joe Tanner and Rachel Sylvester, thank you both very much.
Richard Powell is Professor of Arctic Studies at Cambridge University and a Director of their Scott Polar Research Institute. Professor Powell, just tell us about the geographical and logistical significance of Greenland first.
Thank you. So Greenland is obviously the world's largest island. It's about 2.2 million square kilometers, almost half the size of Europe. So it's absolutely huge island. Clearly, because of its proximity to the Arctic, but also the North Atlantic and North America, it's always been of significance. You know, geographically, in terms of security and defense, particularly since World War II, and then also in terms of navigation, both historically in the sort of the classic search for the Northwest Passage and exploration in the Arctic. Its presence is particularly is particularly significant in both in terms of security, but also its perceived resources through human history since at least the 15th, 16th century. This idea that it's a place of an El Dorado or fool's gold. Martin Frobisher's famous fool's gold comes from missions near Greenland, and those tropes continue right to this day, I think, in the current resurgence of geopolitical and security interest.
And we should say that I think an American president expressed an interest in acquiring it way back in the 19th century. It's not all that new, this.
No, absolutely, yeah. So the first American suggestions for the sort of purchase of Greenland were 1820s, the early 19th century. The first American president to suggest the purchase of Greenland was Andrew Jackson, and I think that has some significance in the Trump the Trump dimension, that obviously Andrew Jackson is the sort of hero of Trump's. But yeah, all the way ever since, there's always been American interest. Famously, Robert Peary, the famous American Arctic explorer, who was first to visit the North Pole. He wanted the Americans to buy Greenland. It happened during World War I. Roosevelt famously, during World War II and the end of World War II, wanted to purchase Greenland, and then obviously the first Trump administration as well. So it's come back many times in the past centuries. Absolutely.
Now, J.D. Vance there mentioned this US Space Force base. It's in a place called Pituffik.
Yes.
And I think most of us just simply don't have a clue what a Space Force base might be up to. But I understand there's the potential for it to become part of a kind of Israel-style Iron Dome system. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Well, so basically during World War II, the Americans had various bases on Greenland and never really left. And the most significant one through the Cold War was a place called the Tula Air Base, which you may have heard of. It's been famous over the years for continental defense, and but also controversial because it forced the relocation of the local Inuit inhabitants. And the Pituffik spaceport, as now termed, is basically the Tula Air Base, which was renamed in 2023 as part of the investment in space. The creation of Space Force in the first Trump presidency, but then the gradual development of the need for satellite and sort of outer space defense security capabilities, as well as military and missile capabilities. So it's effectively it's the same base that's been upgraded and renamed the Pituffik as a kind of a sign that of the further investment and development. But yeah, the idea is that it will, it's absolutely critical, at least as the Americans see it, and obviously for NATO as well, it's critical to sort of defense of North America and through that the US for attack from over the North, missiles over the North Pole, or monitoring of submarines in the Arctic Ocean, but also potentially for developments in weapons, in satellite-based weapons and things in outer space. Well, but that's the idea, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, just very briefly, might America's apparent renewed interest in this space, or a greater form of interest, investment in this space, show a greater commitment to NATO than we might have imagined? Because if you read some of the stuff that comes out of the White House, they're edging away from NATO.
No, exactly. I think that's one of the strange dimensions of it. So the way in which the Danes have tried to reassert their kind of control and the role of Greenland within the Kingdom of Denmark has been to promise more military and security surveillance investment as a way of, as part of NATO, so that it's a kind of Danish responsibility within NATO for the surveillance of most of Greenland. The Pituffik is key for the more kind of international defense for the Americans, but it shows how complicated the situation is. And obviously the American security interest doesn't take account really of the desires of the Greenlanders, who have their own self-rule government. They've just had elections. They're in coalition discussions at the moment. None of the parties are suggesting further significant cooperation with the Americans now. The idea, the desire for America as a sort of favored partner, which was there in the run-up to the election, has become more disrupted because of these actions. And so what the Americans actually want, or what the Trump administration actually want when they say we want Greenland, is still like, is it more control over security? I think that would be welcomed, or is it something else? Is it access to the potential minerals and resources? And I think that's the real unknown question. But it certainly shows there's a lack of a clear, coherent policy for American sort of interests in Greenland at the moment, and that fits with what we're seeing across other parts of the world, in Europe and the Middle East and things.
Yeah.